of the 15th century came stories of the madman Dracula. The real man was a 15th century warlord. He ruled his state of Wallachia, as it was called, Romania as it is today. And he had a reputation in his own lifetime, and certainly since, as being a bloodthirsty monster. Town squares across Europe would have flocked to have heard the latest installment of the story of Dracula.
These stories were preserved in pamphlets which seem to have had a quite wide readership across Europe. They're full of all the lurid details of the terrible things he's done. There's a very tabloid edge to this kind of literature. It is sensational literature. The real reason this is a bestseller is it's full of really gruesome stuff.
There is lurid description, page after page, of just how awful it was. How people were impaled and they were hacked to pieces and their heads were used like cabbages. The imagery is absolutely horrific. But some of it, and this is the important thing, some of it was based on fact.
Don't waste your strength.
Who is there? Where am I? Shh.
Where am I?
Hell.
No, he's not.
Whose house is this?
Why don't you tell him? He wants to know where he is. Why don't you tell him?
Tell me!
You're not in hell. But you'll soon wish you were. You're better off with the devil than with this soulless
Bastards! You get us all killed.
We're dead already. He's just throwing out the pain.
Our key sources for Dracula are the experiences of three religious men. Brother Hans, Brother Michael, and the youngest and historically the most important novice Jakob. These three monks crossed paths with Dracula. The result was fairly unpleasant.
What does he want with us?
I don't know. If he wanted us dead, he'd have killed us already.
He's killed Catholics before. Why not us?
He kills Catholics?
He kills whoever he wants.
Perhaps he wants to meet with us.
That's what you should be afraid of most.
Why?
Why don't you tell Brother Jakob what Dracula did to the Turks?
What Turks?
2 Turks were sent by the Sultan. This was a chance for Vlad to make peace with his most powerful enemy, Mehmed, whose Muslim empire could crush Wallachia at the wave of a hand. The Turkish ambassadors traveled from the heart of the Ottoman stronghold to the court of Vlad III. When they knelt down in front of Dracula, they bowed their head out of respect. But they didn't take off their hats.
Why?
They were not allowed to. It's the custom.
To Vlad, it was a sign of contempt.
What did he do?
Oh, he let them keep their hats on. Actually, he made sure they never took them off. So, still ready to meet Dracula?
If I were a prisoner chained to a wall in Vlad's dungeon, I'd be very worried indeed. You have a stake placed outside a cell, and you see that all the time, through the only window you've got.
They were placed there deliberately, on Vlad's orders, the maximum psychological pressure.
If you put a stake in front of a prison cell, it's a very clear threat. It says showing the torture instrument. And, you know, every time you look out there, you're like, oh no, please. You know, it's there all the time. It just makes it more physical and more real.
Impaling is a very difficult method of torture and or execution. I don't think you can walk away from impalement. I've never come across any examples of anybody who survives. When Vlad becomes ruler of Wallachia, what we have are a number of rival groups setting themselves up, all of them claiming to be ruler of Wallachia. They come from the boyar class, from the nobility. Vlad's first task is to weed out his enemies and to bring those men into line.
Initially, Vlad tried to be very strong in the interior politics and to show just he's a very strong man. And one of the strategies that he used was that he would impale people. Impaling is kind of a cheap technique. As long as you have trees, small trees, you can get the stakes, and the tree must not be too thick nor too thin, and then you just remove all the little branches and stuff, and in the end you just have a stake. The stake is not pointed too much, because the thing is, if it's pointed too much, then it will easily rupture the vessels, and then the person will die too fast. And you don't want that. You want the person to die slowly. Then grease is put on top, and the person is put on the floor. And then it's just inserted anally as far as you can. And then you just lift up the person. Then the person will slowly slide down, usually. In the better situation, the person dies from circulatory shock, which means the circulation shuts down and then you're unconscious and you cannot survive that. This is relatively quick death. In other cases, people would just stay there and die slowly. Sometimes the stake exits somewhere. Either it would not pop out at all, or it would pop out anywhere, in the back or on the sides or on the front. It was a technique that would put people on display, make them look very helpless and stupid, and so it's not just killing the person, it's just showing everybody who sees that, you know, I'm in power, this person is so not in power, like, forget it.
Vlad the Impaler was renowned for his ability to impale his enemies and, if you like, had an obsession with it as a form of torture and death. And to understand why that was, you really need to look at his childhood.
Vlad and his brother Radu were sent by their father, Vlad Dracula, the ruler of Wallachia, to the Turks, where they will be kept as hostages.
This is totally unimaginable. I mean, this would be like, I don't know, the leader of Iraq is giving his two sons to the United States to balance out power. You know, to be given by your own father to a very, very strong superpower. You know, you're like, what's going on here? What's daddy doing with us?
Vlad spent a great deal of his childhood at the hands of the Turks, and it's possible he was sexually abused by them.
I think it's very likely that they were sodomized. This was traditional practice, the whole of the Turkish court for many generations by this time.
Being brutalised at a very young age takes its toll. Feeling powerless, feeling angry, you know, vulnerable. And, you know, certainly what I know about powerless people is at some point they will try and take the power back.
I don't think it's too far a reach to think that the whole obsession with impalement comes from that idea, from the anal intercourse that Vlad would have gone through. In many ways, the impalement that characterizes him is payback.
Mad bastard.
Is he?
Is he what?
Is he a madman?
What else would you call the man who impaled every Saxon in Brasov?
Thorough?
Brother Michael, do you think God will forgive this tyrant?
I pray he does.
Don't waste your breath. Pray for the women he's murdered. Thousands of women.
You think he cares who lives or dies? I know a time he impaled a whole family of Saxons. And as they slowly died, the filthy bastard brought his throne and watched. And as he watched, the smell of the blood aroused his appetite. And he had a table laid, a feast served right there. And as he dined, he watched them on the stakes, dancing and twitching like frogs. And they say Dracula declared, how graceful they looked.
Impaling is a very public, very noisy, very smelly method of killing people. While the victim was being impaled, they made a lot of noise, they discharged a lot of body fluids, and anybody within whiff, let alone earshot, would have realized that something really unpleasant was going on and would have practically been willing to do anything to avoid that fate.
That day, there was a servant who didn't enjoy the stench of blood and rotting flesh. So being a reasonable and understanding tyrant, Vlad decided to put the poor man out of his predicament. He had him impaled on a longer stake. So high in the fresh air that the stink couldn't reach him.
I think Vlad realized that his attitude, the fact that he really doesn't mind who dies, he realized this was an important weapon. It's a psychological tool that he can use. It can instill terror into his enemies. It's easy to issue an order and somebody else carries out the actual deaths, but Vlad is a hands-on killer, and that makes him a very different kind of man indeed.
He's a sadist in the sense that he likes to be hands-on. He's doing it rather than ordering people to do it. Or even when he orders people to do it, it's still a form of control, but he wants to be up close and personal to it. You know, it wasn't just about controlling things for the purposes of maintaining his empire. It was about the personal gratification that he got from it himself.
I think the idea of Vlad impaling children is the most difficult one. The most difficult because to us it is the most horrendous. But we have to remember that children were a commodity. Children would grow up to become possible enemies. They're cute today, but tomorrow they are the guy who will kill you. And you've got the whole, sick though it might sound, the whole logistical problem. What do you do with a small child whose mother and father you've just impaled? You kill them as well.
He slaughtered babies who never had so much as a wicked thought in their lives, killed their mothers, cut off their breasts, cut off the heads of the infants and
That's enough. He's a murderer, but he's still a Christian.
What kind of Christian?
Name another ruler who could defend this pathetic country against the Turks.
Wallachia is a very small state, surrounded by much larger enemies. We've no idea of the size of Vlad's army. Intelligent guesswork would imply perhaps 20,000 men at best against a Turkish army that must have trebled that number. The Turks were the most formidable military force in the world at that time. So Vlad has to do something astonishing to stop them.
Dracula knew that his army was no match for the Sultan. So he sent a message to the Holy Roman Empire demanding troops. He waited and he waited for his Christian allies. But they never came. Dracula had to face the Ottomans alone.
So, how did he fight the Turks?
He didn't. Dracula to see the most sickening sight. A forest of Vlad's victims.
The Forest of the Impaled was clearly a psychological weapon of a very high order. He showed strength by impaling many, a forest of his own people, and the foot soldiers of the advancing army would then look towards these individuals, one after another, of people, his own people, that he had done this horrific act to, and they would think to themselves, if he can do this to his own people, what the hell is he going to do to us?
It stopped the Turks in their tracks. The Sultan himself was brought to the front of the army to see for himself this ghastly scene. And he said to his generals, we can't defeat this man. And he simply turned tail and went home.
He's a monster. But he saved this country. If he hadn't done what he did, we'd be prisoners of the Sultan instead.
What's the difference? Either way, you get something shoved up your ass. Yeah, go on, laugh. It'll soon be over.
The monks waiting in their cell knew that they were going to have this day of reckoning, a time when they were summoned, but they wouldn't know when they were going to be summoned, what they were going to be asked. There was no surety when it came to Vlad. You did not know what the outcome would be. And he enjoyed having that power over people. He clearly enjoyed watching them squirm.
Not sharing, Brother Jakob.
What's that?
Our friend was just about to share his meal with us.
Don't eat it. It could be a test.
What?
It's what he does. Do you remember the priest?
What priest?
The Wallachian priest. He preached a sermon one Sunday. Whatever is stolen must be returned.
So?
When Dracula found out about this sermon, he decided to invite the priest to his castle.
And?
He sat the priest at the table. And at the table, Dracula cut some bread, which the priest ate, naturally. It was then that he decided to remind the holy man about his sermon. Whatever is taken must be returned.
No, my lord.
And for that, Vlad Dracula had him impaled.
We certainly know that Vlad liked to play his mind games, and, you know, he would lay traps for people. He's incredibly narcissistic. People are there for his own enjoyment.
was no real right way of getting around Vlad and his twisted mind. This man was volatile, inconsistent, totally arbitrary in the way in which he took or made decisions. So the monks waiting in their cell, knowing they were going to have this day of reckoning, the time when they were summoned to account for themselves in front of Vlad, would not have known.
When you meet Dracula, don't lie to him.
How will he know? How will he know if I'm lying?
He'll find out. He had a girl, a mistress. She came to him with good news. Vlad didn't take her word for it. He had her examined to make sure she was really pregnant. To him.
What if he doesn't like the truth?
And at least you'll die with purity. We are men of God. We tell the truth. Just pray you die fast. It's time.
When the monks were finally brought before Dracula, there had to be this reckoning, this day of judgment. They know this man's reputation. He is subject to whims. He is vicious. And they are going to face questioning by him. Their survival depends on what answers they give to this most disreputable and most dangerous of rulers.
Domine virtutum, ne derelinquas nas orphanum, sed mite promissum Patris in nos, Spiritum veritati, Alleluia. Is the Gregorian monastery so poor it can't provide shoes?
We are of the Barnardine order, my lord. We dress humbly to seek our place in heaven.
How quickly do you want to get there?
As quickly as our Lord demands.
And who is your Lord?
The same as yours, my lord.
You, come closer. Tell me, where do you think I will go after I die? Answer me! Tell me before I kill you. Slowly.
Let me answer you, my lord.
Go on.
Now, Michael was faced with an agonizing choice. As a Christian, he must have known that Vlad's soul was going to burn forever in hell fire.
I know you will obtain salvation because your appointment is by God. God in heaven knows the good you have done. Who else could defend a modest country like Wallachia against Islam? Men have misunderstood you on earth, but in heaven you will be vindicated.
In that split second in which he had to make up his mind, he lied. Vlad Dracula was no fool. He knew exactly what Michael was doing. He was lying to try to save his skin.
Goodbye.
No, please, sir. No, my lord, no! 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 No!
So, little one, come to me. Come. Did you lie to me too? No, you're still pure. Still so pure. Tell me the truth. Where will I go when I die?
Enough! Prepare the stake for me. You kill in the name of God, but you will never, ever meet him. It is even possible the devil himself will not bother with you. But if he does, you will be discarded to the darkest corner of hell. Yours will be an eternity of isolation and insignificance. Alone, weak, unfeeling.
What are you waiting for? Give it to me. Hold his legs.
Thank you, my Lord. You are bringing me closer to my real Lord, the true power and the glory, the one who rules in heaven and earth.
time to rule, bastard!
Hans knew he was going to die, so he stood up to Vlad. I'd like to think that Hans regarded it as a triumph. In that split second before he died, I think he would have regarded it as a victory.
Now you, tell me where I will go when I die.
It's a very, very difficult question to answer. What on earth could Jakob say which would mean that he survived? We don't know what answer Jakob gave. It's not recorded. But whatever it was, he did survive.
The Dracula story gets out with Brother Jakob, who gets away alive. That's why the name Dracula is kind of carved in blood across the archives.
What we know of Vlad means that there weren't very many survivors. People who came in contact with him tended to die, and therefore novice Jakob is a particularly valuable source. It was unlikely he'd survive, and yet he did. And as a result, we have this incredibly powerful narration about Vlad the Impaler's behaviour.
The story of the real Dracula was, of course, taken up by Bram Stoker, drawing on a number of factors. First of all, the place. Transylvania. It was part of Wallachia. It was part of Vlad's kingdom. We have the stake. The only way to kill a vampire is to drive a stake through his heart. And the image of the stake being driven through human bodies was the reality of Dracula's life. We have the blood obsession that we associate with the vampire, with Vlad. We have a man who didn't care how much blood he spilt. Finally, we have the name, Dracula. Today, it has a deadly sound to it. It means son of the devil. The devil, of course, a horrific, vengeful, impossible to stop creature. And that is exactly the image that we have from the real Vlad Dracula.
If you commit a massacre, you leave somebody alive to tell the tale. Brother Jakob is the guy who tells the tale. If it wasn't for this, we probably wouldn't know who Dracula was now.
I wonder if, in fact, Vlad deliberately let novice Jakob go. Because by having this young monk relate this terrifying story, the message has been delivered. He is the most terrifying man on earth, so don't mess with him.